All right. Hi, everybody. It's me, Jackie, and I'm here with Patrice, and she's here to share her Alpha One journey with us. Patrice, go ahead and tell your story. Along the way, I might stop you and ask you a few questions. Otherwise, I might let you, tell your story, then wait till you're done and maybe ask a few questions afterwards. I'm so glad that you're here with me. And I remember meeting you at the conference in Miami. And was that your caregiver or who that was with you? My granddaughter
Oh,
danced, when
yes.
they had the dance part. She had the funnest time dance and with
Yeah,
your
that
friend
was
that
my
was there with
partner.
you. And
Yes.
your partner. Oh, good, good. I thought so, but I didn't want to. I didn't want to, assume or anything. But I thought that's what when you introduced me,
Mhm.
I thought that's what you did. But well, I'm so glad to have you here. All right. Well, go ahead and share your Alpha One story with everybody, and tell us anything you want. A little bit about yourself, a little about your story, and anything else
Okay.
you'd like to
Well, thank
add.
you so much for having me here, Jackie. It's great to see you again. I just found out
You
I'm
too.
actually attending the conference this year again in a couple of weeks. Yeah, I'm going to be
Yay!
joining the Speakers Bureau with the Alpha One Foundation.
Awesome. Awesome.
So a little bit about my story. I've always had asthma, severe asthma from a kid. About 18 months is when I was told that my parents first discovered that I had asthma. I had a severe asthma attack and I had to go to the hospital and ICU for a couple of weeks. And from then on, I'm always had issues with my breathing. They told me it was just asthma. And I would like to say up until the time I was about in my late teens, that was my life. I would be in the hospital maybe 4 times out of the year, for weeks at a time, with issues of my lungs. And growing up, because of that, I was always on steroids, which, those of us who know steroids, being on it for a long period of time, caused me to, have significant weight gain, which caused a lot of other issues, diabetes, high blood pressure, all of those things that I didn't understand if I would have known when I was a kid. Now what I know, I would have, taken better part or even just had different choices as far as my eating and everything. I just didn't know what was going on. So now, fast forward into uh, early 2023, I had had several lung infections, and COVID being COVID, I had took COVID once, but I had multiple lung infections. Right, they weren't saying they were COVID, they weren't the flu. They just said you're having all these lung infections. So um, my primary care physician recommended a pulmonologist, and I started seeing him. And shout out to Dr. Jesus Polino in Fort Myers. He's an amazing pulmonologist. He is the one that
Mm.
he had did a couple of scans, and he saw some nodules in my lungs, and he decided to do the swab test. He was like, do you mind if I do this test on you? Because there's something going on with your lungs that's not just asthma, So I was like, sure. And lo and behold, Alpha 1 antitrypsin deficiency.
I'm so glad he do. I'm so glad that he,
I am
tested you.
too, because I had no clue. I didn't know what it was. And then when I initially started reading about it, I was like, wait a minute. They were saying that it affects people of European descent. And, I did read that, I think they said 2% of African Americans have that due to that, right? And I was like, okay, so had me questioning a lot. I knew there was some European descent on my dad's side, because he's from, he was born in New Orleans. So, about the culture, the Creoles, we were Louisiana Creole. So I knew there was some Irish and Spanish in there. So I was like, okay, well, maybe that's where it was. But lo and behold, I found out I did a ancestry DNA test. And I did find out, European ancestry. However, my mom got tested for Alpha 1. She decided she would do it, and she came out with she's Alpha 1. She has Alpha 1 too, and which was a shock because I had no
Sorry to hear that.
idea.
Yeah. Sorry to hear. I'm glad that
Yeah,
she,
and I
got
just
tested.
we were in shock because I had no clue. She didn't had no clue there was any European descent, but apparently there is on her side, and it came from
Mm,
through a woman. So it's just interesting to know the ancestry, to know the history, and now what I am doing is trying to advocate for more people of color to bring awareness to them. And because I've talked to some, there's another woman named Tracy Watkins who has alpha one, and she says she's African American. She's been diagnosed for over 10 years now. Her mom, there's a lot of females in her family who have it. However, she talked about starting a group to advocate for, bring awareness to people of color, because I know there's so many people who of color who are not aware of this disease. And even last year at the conference, as you saw, I was the only person of color out of the hundreds of people that were there. It was just me showing up as, a person, they thought I was a
yeah.
caregiver. And I was like, no, I have Alpha 1, a warrior. So that is where I am now. So now I'm starting to speak out about it. I've done a couple of interviews with Patient Worthy. I've done an article with them. I've also they also just published an article recently on the Alpha One Foundation website. So I just want to be that voice, and I think um, the pushback is, it can't affect us, and it doesn't affect us. Like it's, that came from the Vikings. We're not Vikings, and like, yeah, we are.
Right. We're still in there. Yeah. I'm so glad that, you're going to do that. Here it's rare enough and hard enough to get diagnosed with alpha 1, and I'm so glad that the doctor that tested you, put that aside. And that's probably what's happened. Somebody put aside, well, she's African American or whatever, we don't need to test her, or, whatever. So I'm so glad that that happened for you. Not that you have it, but I'm
Yes.
glad that, you got tested. Yes, finally. But at least you got the right doctor now. I'm glad, that you have a
Yeah.
great doctor
Yeah, he's
to,
phenomenal. Right now, we're going through this whole. It's been over a year, but we're fighting to get infusions for me, and that's been a struggle.
yeah,
Fighting with the insurance companies with this medication. That's a different beast in this in itself. It's been so
right,
frustrating.
right.
I've cried so many days, and I'm still waiting to get the infusions.
I'm glad that you have a good doctor behind you, and I'm sure he's standing up for you. And um, I'm sure the foundation, too, as well, will help you. Or AlphaNet, which you usually don't get an AlphaNet coordinator until after you start infusing, but there still is. Oh my goodness, why can't I think? My brain, I can't think of it now, but I'm sure. Oh, the Reach program through AlphaNet. If you don't infuse, you can sign up through them, and they might be able to help with something like that. Or there's somebody like when you start infusing, you'll get an AlphaNet coordinator, and they like talk with you once a month. But people that don't infuse or have lung problems or aren't, as affected at the time, they put them in the Reach program, which that's fairly new within the last at least 5 years or so. Maybe you could, join that if you haven't, and look out for them at the conference. That Reach table will be there at the
Okay.
conference too.
Yeah,
So
I have an Alpha One. Lisa Nice was my Alpha One coordinator last year. She had just signed up with her. So I do have an Alpha Net coordinator. I just talked to my
good. Oh, you
coordinator
too.
actually today. Lisa is taking a break, and I can't remember her name, but she's new. I just started with her. So yeah, I love AlphaNet, and they've been very supportive. They'll check in like, okay, do you know any updates, the status? And so they'll check in, and I'm just claiming the victory. I'm hoping, sooner than later that it'll
Good.
come through.
Yeah, I hope so for you too. Goodness, I'm trying to think if I have any questions for you. Mostly what I was going to ask, and I had to ask you answered, so that's good about the, you know, not normally, with African Americans that don't get tested because, I think, oh no, you
Yeah,
don't
so
have it.
that
How
was
many
the case
times?
I think with my mom, because my mom is liver affected. And so, my mom, when they, were doing liver scans, she has some cirrhosis there. My mom has been healthy her whole life. She doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, and they were like, why does your liver look like this and you don't? And they couldn't figure it out then. And then when she was younger, she used to have issues with anemia, vitamin D. She used to be really sickly, and then she had a younger sibling that passed away, and they said it was a mysterious illness, and this is probably like the early 50s, right? And my mom is
Oh yeah.
74, and so this is her younger sibling, and they said it was a mysterious illness. They thought it was sickle cell, but they couldn't label because we're African American, or they were African American, of course. And so, but now I told, we think that it was Alpha One because he was a toddler when he died, her sibling.
Wow. Yeah. You know, dying as a child that young, it's got to be something. So, what that reminds me when you said about the cirrhosis and your mom. I have a good friend, Deb. She's the co-leader of the support group that we run, and she has liver problems, but nothing ever comes up in her blood work. The way they found that was through a sonogram for something else, that she was having done, and that's how they found it. And I have mild liver disease, which nothing comes up in my blood work either. I was found that through one of the Alpha 1 liver studies
Right.
that I was in. That's the only way I know, so, and my blood work still, shows good. So we never know what's
Never
going on in
known at
there.
all.
Right. Well, I am so glad that you took this time with me today. I appreciate it, and I'm excited that I get to see you in Miami again. I won't have my granddaughter with, but my aunt is coming with me. My dad was one of 14, and she's one of the 14 that there's a few of them that tested in my family, that have Alpha 1. And she gets to come with me this year, so um, I look forward to introducing you to her, and it'll be
Yeah,
good to
good to
see you
see you
again.
too. Well, may I ask you a question? Who was the first one
hmm
diagnosed with Alpha One in your family?
I was the first one diagnosed in my family. I was diagnosed in 2010. For the years, I kind of had the same thing about asthma. I always wondered if I had asthma, like PE, and when you have to run the mile for your PE. I don't know
Yes,
if you had that
yes,
at your school,
yes.
but you have to do it every year. And I had the hardest time. I couldn't breathe. I'd always get so much pain. And, I always thought that my PE teacher just thought that I was lazy and didn't want to do it. I know I did it, but as far as I could, but I could
Mhm.
never finish it. And I was sick a lot
Mhm.
when I was younger. But I got diagnosed in 2010 at 39. But I had symptoms, like I said before, high school, but that really started when I was
Right.
29. I was the first one. So I've had a few tested and a few that are. I have others that don't want
Yeah,
to be
me
tested.
too.
They're
Is
like,
is
oh,
this true? Yeah.
we don't need to test. But it seems like over the years now, it's going to be 15 years now that I've been diagnosed. So now, I mean, there's a few more, like each year, there's a different one they'll ask you again. What's that thing you have again? Can I get that test? And I'm like, yes, here you go. Which I know they're all sick
Yeah.
of me, tell them about it. But I try not to harsh on them too much.
And one of the things that I struggle with because I'm MS, and so and I know that's the conversation around the infusions as well, is because MS is considered a carrier. Actually, having even though like I've had like the severe, I know it affects people
Right.
differently, and so. Even with that, I had a family member that tested for it, and that family member was a SS, but that family member is a male, and that family member didn't want to, doesn't want to accept, like, oh, that the materials that I read is just that you're a carrier, excuse me, and if you're not showing any symptoms, you're okay. And I'm like, no, that's not the case.
Yes. We hate that term, and you'll notice that in a
Yes.
lot of their groups that a lot of us hate. I'm a ZZ, but I have so many carrier friends, and I hate that. I hate to even use the term, that are sicker or just as sick as I am. And I have a lot of MS friends who have lung problems, and, they're told sometimes, you shouldn't have any
Yeah.
problems. So, yeah, they're at least they're doing more now with the carriers. Now starting with MZs. Hopefully they'll get to MSs and start doing stuff
Yeah.
with that as well. So
Hopefully, I'm keeping
hopefully,
my fingers crossed. If they find, I know that they're talking about doing a lot of gene therapy and things of that sort, and they were starting out with the Z. So I'm in hopes that they're able to find something, and like you said, it can trickle down to the S.
right, exactly. Hopefully they're doing a lot
Yeah,
of good stuff
I
right now. I
hear,
mean, it's come on.
I'm hearing it. So I'm looking forward to seeing you.
Okay, you too. Well, thank you so much.